My family expects me to forgive my brother after what he did to my fiancée at their home. I am 27 years old and my fiancée is 25. We met almost 7 years ago when we were both in college. We met through mutual friends and started dating about a year later. When I introduced her to my family, everyone was in awe of her, even my mother, who is usually quite reserved with foreigners. My mother and father are immigrants, and since moving to the country where we live, they have always stayed close to the local community. So in general, they are wary of people who do not belong to our community. At this point, I should mention my brother, who is 29 years old. Before the incident, he was a superhero to me. I always admired him because he was never afraid of the local kids and was always a protector for me and our younger sister, who is 22 years old. He always reminded us that we should not hang our heads just because someone is trying to put us down, that we have the same rights to live here as everyone else. When I introduced my girlfriend to him, they became good friends over time. My fiancée became quite close to my family, especially my brother and sister. She also socialized with my other relatives, went shopping with my sister and mother, played pool with me and my cousin, and attended every party my family organized. At one of these parties, my family and I got very drunk, to the point that I fell asleep on the floor in my parents' living room. When the party ended, my girlfriend started acting strange, and when I asked her what was going on, she said, "I think your brother tried to kiss me." The shock from her words was so great that any effect of the alcohol disappeared, and I asked her to tell me everything that happened. She said that some guests went up to the roof to have a drink and get some fresh air or something like that. Gradually, everyone dispersed, and in the end, only she and my brother were left on the roof. They drank a little more, and while they were talking, she noticed that he was staring at her. Suddenly, he leaned over, trying to kiss her, but she was faster and dodged. The atmosphere became very awkward, and she left. When she finished her story, I took her home and later talked to my brother to find out what happened. He told me the same story, but from his point of view. He apologized, saying he was so drunk that he didn't know what he was doing and asked for forgiveness. Just the memory of that conversation makes my blood boil because at the time, I thought it was just a minor incident, that it could be resolved with conversation and setting boundaries. I couldn't even imagine what would happen next. After what happened at that party, the relationship between my brother and me became strained. We hardly talked, and when we did, it was as polite as possible, as if we were strangers. The only person besides the three of us who knew what happened was my younger sister. One day, when she was talking to my girlfriend, she asked why my brother and I had grown apart, and then my girlfriend told her everything. My girlfriend and I decided not to talk about it with the rest of the family, to avoid an even bigger rift in our relationship. A few months after that, my mom threw a party and invited a lot of people, friends, relatives, and members of our community. At that party, my girlfriend met my brother again. At that moment, I thought that enough time had passed since the incident with the kiss, and this could be the first step to normalizing the relationship. At some point, I lost sight of her and started looking for her. I went around the whole party, but she was nowhere to be found, and I thought that she was probably with my sister. But something made me go upstairs. As I was going up the stairs, I started hearing strange sounds from one of the rooms. Opening the door, I saw my brother pressing my girlfriend to the bed, covering her mouth, and trying to put his hand under her dress while she was resisting. I didn't think twice and immediately attacked my brother, starting to beat him. My girlfriend ran out of the room as fast as possible and ran downstairs for help. When my dad and uncle went upstairs, I was still beating my brother. My dad could have separated us, but I kept insulting him and tried to hit him again. In the end, he separated us. We were examining my brother outside the door when my dad asked me what the hell had happened and what made me do this. It took me a while to find the words, but in the end, I said that I had just seen my brother try to rape my girlfriend. My father, as far as I could understand, was shocked. He sat on the floor, put his hand on the flask, and remained silent for about 10 minutes until my uncles called him to take my brother to the hospital. After my brother was taken away, I went to look for my girlfriend and found her with my sister. They were talking about what had happened. I said goodbye to my sister and we left. All the way home, she did not stop crying. She was confused and angry, and when we got home, she continued to cry until she fell asleep. This became a routine for several days until she gradually began to talk again. During those days, my family kept me updated on my brother's condition. I had broken his nose and dislocated his jaw. My mother was in denial, not believing that her son was capable of such a thing, but I didn't think much about it because I understood that everyone reacts differently. To some extent, I even understood why my mother was trying to justify my brother's action. The last I heard of him after he left the hospital was that my family had turned their backs on him for what he did. He was fired from his job and left town. In the following weeks, I almost completely cut off all contact with the outside world and focused on helping my girlfriend. To say the least, she was coping with the situation as best she could. She was still very afraid of what had happened and was completely exhausted. She spent almost a month at home, but eventually she had to go back to work. However, a few hours later, she returned, saying that she could not get rid of the feeling of threat, that she felt in danger, and that at any moment, someone could try to harm her. Update 1. Hello everyone. Honestly, I did not expect to write an update. I just wanted to throw out my feelings, but I never expected to be so supported. I want to answer some questions that you have. Firstly, many people got the impression that I was going to forgive my brother. This will never happen. For clarity, I no longer have a brother. This person is dead to me. Secondly, not all members of my family think that I need to forgive my brother. Only a minority of them think so. I could easily stop communicating with all these people, except my parents. I also want to clarify that my sister is on my side. She is my fiancee's best friend, and the only one besides me who knows what she went through in the first month after the incident. Thirdly, for those who asked what I told my mom and dad, I directly stated that if I found out my brother was in the city, I would never talk to them again. As for what my brother has been doing in recent years, according to my mom, he contacted her at the beginning of the pandemic. He moved to the other end of the country, changed his name, and started going to therapy in order to one day improve. Nonsense. I didn't ask anything else, and my sister didn't ask our parents about him either. So that's all we know. Regarding my brother's current activities, my mother claims that he got in touch with her around the start of the pandemic. In an attempt to one day improve, he relocated to the opposite side of the nation, changed his identity, and began attending therapy. Nonsense. My sister didn't question our parents about him, and neither did I. That's all we know then. Someone also wrote me a private message asking why my brother wasn't in prison. I responded to this person, but I want to tell everyone about it. The main reason is that I beat my brother to the point that he had to be taken to the hospital. When I consulted with my lawyer friend, she said that if I sued my brother, he could file a counterclaim. I would have to spend some time in prison, and my then girlfriend would have to testify, which she was not ready to do at the time. My priority was to support her. I could not help her while in prison. The best we could do at the time was to get a restraining order for her. One of the reasons I did not post an update earlier is because we were both busy getting the order. I did not tell my parents about it, so if my brother had suddenly shown up, he would have been taken straight to the local police station. Some of you mentioned that my mother's behavior in this situation is due to the fact that, as I said in the previous post, my girlfriend is not from our community. But I can assure you that is not the case. I already had a speech prepared for everyone who was going to forgive my brother. For my parents, I prepared an ultimatum to choose between their son, the man who tried to rape his brother's fiancée, or me and their daughter. But then I realized something else. While reading the comments on my previous post, I came across thoughts that made me consider a terrifying possibility. Many comments pointed out that my brother was so confident in himself that he attempted to rape my fiancée in a house full of people. Some suggested that, judging by my parents' reactions, maybe my brother had done something like this before, and worse, that my parents were covering it up. This thought shocked me. I had never considered such a possibility. It became clear that I was thinking about it too much, and my fiancée asked me what was on my mind. When I told her that maybe my brother had already tried or even succeeded in doing something like this to other girls in the past, she also got chills down her spine. After that, we talked to my sister and then started asking other family members, specifically those who supported me, as well as friends and members of our community, if they had ever noticed anything strange in my brother's behavior before the incident. At first, no one in my family could recall my brother exhibiting such behavior, but with friends, the situation was different. Some of them remembered that my brother was particularly kind to other family members' girlfriend, sometimes too pushy, but nothing serious enough to suggest an attempted rape. Then my sister contacted my brother's ex-girlfriend's sister. She told us that my brother behaved very strangely with her family when he was dating her sister. She noticed that her sister became extremely quiet in his presence. She also mentioned that my brother was excessively flirtatious with. We also reached out to a former colleague of my brother. She told us that after a company party, he once took another employee home with him. She remembered that her friend had been very drunk at the time. The morning after the party, the woman could barely recall anything from the night before. This entire situation made me realize that my brother was never the person I thought he was. After hearing these stories, I am now convinced that my brother is a threat to others. Since yesterday, everyone involved in this case has been collecting all sorts of evidence against my brother. When we are ready, we will present all of this to our community on social media and to anyone else who might care. I also have to say that I have not spoken to my parents about this yet. Tomorrow morning, I am going to tell them everything and at the same time give them an ultimatum. I also intend to say that if there is any evidence that someone knew about my brother's actions but stayed silent, there will be consequences. I won't be able to write updates for a while, at least not until my brother faces the consequences of his action. This is not how I imagined the first few weeks of my engagement, but I can't just let this information slide. My fiancée has been there for me every step of the way, and I've tried to be a support system for her as well. I can't imagine how she feels, but I am incredibly proud of her for not being afraid to face her trauma, especially if it means helping others. Update 2. Hi everyone again. I know it's been a while since my last update, but I wanted to post a full update once things were resolved. Although it's not over yet, I am happy to report that my brother is finally facing justice for his action. After my last update, my fiancée, some friends, and I started investigating my brother's life to see if he had abused or attempted to abuse other women. Once we gathered all the evidence, we had to make sure he was punished. In the end, we found 8 different instances, including my fiancée, where my brother had harassed women. Among them were his ex-girlfriends, former colleagues, and 2 of his current colleagues. I also mentioned that when the evidence was ready, I was going to show it to my parents so they would realize what a monster they were protecting. I also planned to publish all the information on social media. However, I did none of this because our lawyer talked me out of it. He warned that if I showed the information to my parents, there was a chance they would try to protect my brother and interfere with our plans. At first, I didn't consider this because I wanted to bring my parents to their senses. But at that moment, I realized I could no longer trust them, especially considering the possibility that they had covered up his actions in the past. Additionally, publishing the information on social media could have played into my brother's hands, as he could accuse us of slander, complicating things further. So for now, confronting my parents was postponed. I also completely stopped communicating with them to prevent them from ruining everything, as I no longer trusted them. I want to take a moment to mention my sister. She pretended to be neutral all this time, but in reality, she was helping me and my fiancé. During this period, she found out what my brother had been doing. The main things she discovered were shocking. After the incident at the party, my brother moved to the other side of the country because he had a friend there. At that time, my family showed some common sense and turned their backs on him. When he started living there, he spread lies, telling everyone that his family disowned him because they supposedly found out about his affair with his brother's girlfriend. Yes, he had the audacity to spread that story about my fiancée. As I mentioned earlier, we never filed a police report against him because on the night of the incident, I sent him to the hospital. Because of this, we couldn't start a trial without putting myself at risk of being held accountable. That's why my brother was able to get a job and start rebuilding his life. He first contacted my parents at the end of the second year, during the hardest period of the pandemic in our country. Since then, he and my mother maintained regular contact. My mom and dad even visited him a few times. And finally, the worst part, during these years, my brother had a daughter. His daughter was born from a casual relationship. The girl got pregnant by him in April 2021, and they agreed to raise the child together, as neither of them wanted to get married. In December of that year, my niece was born. My brother introduced his girlfriend and daughter to our parents and sister just 2 weeks before we had collected all the evidence against him. When my sister told me about it, it felt like a punch in the gut. At first, I couldn't believe it, but she showed me photos. At that moment, my world was shaken again, because now, not only my family, but his own family would have to face the truth. But then I knew that this child was yet another reason to keep pursuing justice. We couldn't risk the girl or her mother staying in contact with my brother. Throughout this, my fiancée and I supported each other. If this entire situation was difficult for me, I can't even imagine what it was like for her. I'll never fully understand how she found the strength to cope with such a traumatic experience and relive it just to help others. The least I can do for her is to be by her side every step of the way. Then, finally, the day came. My brother was at my parents' house when the police came for him. According to my sister, it was a disaster. The moment the police knocked on the door, my brother tried to escape. The officers caught up with him, and he resisted arrest, forcing them to tase him, which added assault on a police officer to his charges. 2 days later, my brother was sent to jail for the duration of his trial. The trial was not easy, both in and out of the courtroom. During the hearings, 2 of the women my brother hurt couldn't hold back their tears while testifying. My fiancée managed to stay calm while on the stand, but the moment we were alone, she broke down crying. I cried with her, but I also helped calm her down. Then came the turning point, the moment my parents and sister had to testify. Finally, this man was facing justice, but the damage he had done was already too great. I feel like many of the women he hurt will never fully process what happened. At best, they will only learn to live with the trauma. It was the hardest week of my life, but at last, after a long legal battle, my brother was found guilty on 8 counts. He will spend the rest of his life in prison. Of course, he tried to drag me into this, claiming that I had used excessive force against him in self-defense, but the judge dismissed the charge. Moving forward, as for my parents and those who supported my brother, I know it will be hard never to see them again, especially my parents, but I can't trust them anymore. Even though I am losing part of my family, my future feels brighter because I'm standing next to the woman I love. Now I feel like a huge weight has been lifted from my shoulders. I can only express my deepest gratitude and admiration to all the women who had the courage to come forward, and to everyone who shared their own stories in the comments on my posts. To all the women and men who have ever been victims of something so terrible, I sincerely wish for you to live a peaceful life. And to those who are afraid to speak up, I want to say, you are not alone. This situation has proven to me that there are more good people than bad. No matter how dark things seem, there will always be someone ready to lend a helping hand. Final thoughts. What do you think about this entire story? It seems that despite the number of crimes my brother committed, many people would still struggle with the decision of whether to turn in a family member, because despite everything, he is still my brother. And going against one's own parents is one of the hardest decisions anyone could make. But as for me, I know I made the right choice. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comment. Also, check out our previous video.